Recently, Shia Labeouf was received into the Catholic Church, but the Shia that we see here is very different than the one many of us grew up with. We grew up with the Shia of Transformers and his paper bag antics and the Just Do It video that got memed into oblivion. So, what caused such a radical transformation from this seemingly child-crazed superstar? In a recent interview that Shia did with Jon Bernthal, he describes his rock bottom moment and then the radical transformation that was afforded him when he lived with some Cappadocian monks in preparation for a movie role. And I want to talk about this interview today because Shia completely embodies one of the major principles that Dallas Willard talks about in Chapter 9 of The Divine Conspiracy. And it is simply this: we must deal with our lives as they actually are.
All right, so in Chapter 8 of The Divine Conspiracy, Dallas Willard talks about being a disciple or student of Jesus and all that that entails, the high call that that is, and he wrestles with some of the ways that that impacts our salvation. In Chapter 9, he talks about, I'm blanking. He talks about
for Christ-likeness.
A curriculum for Christ-likeness. And in that curriculum for Christ-likeness, he says the first and most essential thing is, and this is where the rubber hits the road, quite literally, dealing with your life. And so today we're going to be talking about dealing with your life, the particulars of your life, and how you have to approach God, not apart from your life, but in the actual life that you have, in all of the pain and in all of the celebration.
Right. And what we're going to do is we're going to pair some quotes from Chapter 9 here with an interview that was done a little over a year ago now with Shia Labeouf and Jon Bernthal. If you didn't know, Shia Labeouf recently got confirmed in the Catholic Church. He entered the Catholic Church. Praise God for that. And I think it's been an amazing journey for him. Many of us remember Shia Labeouf from the Transformers movies and then having this weird hatred for his public persona and having a huge downfall. And this interview with Bernthal comes kind of on the edge of his life in ashes as he's rising like a phoenix into the church. He talks a lot about the way his life used to be and the way his life changed when he went and lived with Cappadocian monks to study for the film Padre Pio, as he was going to play Saint Padre. And so I thought that what Shia says a lot in this interview exemplifies so nicely the things that Willard is trying to describe here in this chapter. And so let's start. I want to start with, we're going to have about 3 paragraphs just from this section near the beginning of Chapter 9. I'm going to play some stuff from Shia. We're going to put those together. I'm going to read one paragraph here to kind of intro us. We'll take a look at Shia, read some more, maybe have some comments afterwards. But that's the goal here. I just want to be able to show you guys, give a real, as we talk about these, they're not abstract, right? We're dealing with your life. We're trying to think about what it means to deal with your life as it is. And I think someone who's been such a shining example of that is Shia Labeouf, funny enough. And so let's hear first, real quick, from Willard. He says, "Let us now be perfectly clear. Your life is not something from which you could stand aside and consider what it would have been like had you had a different one. There is no you apart from your actual life. You are not separate from your life. And in that life, you must find the goodness of God. Otherwise, you will not believe that he has done well by you, and you will not be at peace with him. There is no you apart from your actual life." And I think, I'll just say this real quick, I think so many of us, myself included, sit back and wish many times, oh, if I had done this, if I had done that, or if I maybe changed this plan in the past. It's like, you can't do that because it happened. You can't stand aside and watch it. It's your life. I think so many of us, again, me included, suffer from this nostalgic view that, if I had done things differently, XYZ would have been this way, or these tragedies or these sufferings or these obstacles wouldn't have come in my way. And it just seems so unhelpful. So I just say that to share some of what this makes me think of, this quote from Willard here. But let's start with what Shia describes as what used to run him, what used to be his engine, what used to be the driving force in his life. He's going to talk here about, some of you might be familiar with the film Honey Boy. He's going to talk about some of the origins of that movie and some of the reasons he wanted to make it. So let's go ahead and play. Oh, sorry, I have to give a content warning here, just for those who who need to be aware. Explicit language warning. I'm not going to censor it. It's just there. I don't want to censor people, and so just so you know, if you got kids in the car, if you listen to it, if you're a little bit more sensitive about that thing, just be aware of that. And so let's move forward.
From the fire. Alma Harrell is a great example of a person who, she took a gamble on me. I was in rehab when we started having a conversation. I got arrested in Georgia for fighting with a cop, wound up in rehab, and didn't hear a damn thing about God, spirituality, personal growth, accountability. My whole, as soon as I got to rehab, was let me get back to this hustle. So I started writing a script in rehab. That's how fucking mad I was. I wasn't listening to no therapy. I had been therapized my whole life that it felt like, you want me to focus on the problem? Well, how am I gonna hack this focusing on the problem thing? And how am I gonna find my way back to this fucking hustle so I can get back to my ego? Because really all I cared about was my ego. I didn't give a fuck about getting well. It was all about get well for you, get well for the camera, get well. And so, Honey Boy was born in this kind of toxic milieu of false recovery masked as some kind of like upliftive product, and she was in on it because she thought that it was, I don't know what her motivations were, but it felt like she was doing kind of what you're doing here. When the conversation first started with Alma, it was like, man, we got to get to the root of what the fuck is going on here. Something wrong with you. Let's get well.
It was out of love. It was out of love. Like, y'all fucked with each other. You made stuff together. I love you. What can we do?
It wasn't let's build a product. It wasn't fetishizing product when we first. It wasn't like I was in an environment where she's like,
Academy Award.
Let me go hit you up for a script idea. It wasn't that. She hit me up like, hey, I'm in the same. I'm living a principled life also. Maybe you should get involved in this thing. And immediately I was on as a matter of fact, here's a fucking 60-page monologue I wrote about my dad while I was doing this fourth step, and right away it was almost like I manipulated her into directing this movie, and then that put me in a situation where I was even sicker, because then self-will is run riot in full, because now I'm at Sundance. We just done one Sundance, and I'm like thinking that I can that I'm the ultimate manipulative master. And I was telling other people who would come to me after seeing that movie, asking me about how to help, and I would tell them, well, you just got to paint with your pain, and all this fucking nonsense. It just wasn't. I had no spiritual life, none.
The fact that your spirit.
So we're gonna play another clip here in just a second that Shia further describes kind of his motivations back in those days. But if there's anything here that I think is interesting, it's that he talks about how recovery for him got turned into a game that he can manipulate to boost his own ego. Where he's like, I'm gonna do this 4-step for AA or for this recovery program, but I'm actually just gonna write this script for this movie so that then I can do this thing. And I think many of us struggle. Maybe it's not 4-step in rehab makes it into a movie script, but I think many of us struggle with this, like, I'm gonna make myself better, but it's really just a mask to like make your own ego higher, right? What's the revenge body after the breakup, but like, I'm just gonna make them wish that they hadn't broken them because I'm gonna get so fit and jacked that I'm gonna look awesome. I'm gonna be so cool now and they're gonna wish they had. And it's like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Well, it's his way of dealing with his life without really coming to terms with it, right?
Right.
So it's his way of of doing what Willard is talking about, divorced from anything that transcends his own being and ego. And honestly, I mean, it's the ego, it's the selfishness that I think he would and does in this interview admit drove him to the point where he needed to go to rehab, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the particulars of his life, and the growth journey that he goes on is a story of him dealing with them.
Yeah. And this next clip is going to be, it's a little later, and then about 10 minutes later, he's going to talk some more about that ego drive that's still there as he's trying, as it like brings him to the end, to the bottom, and some of the transformation that starts to happen there.
It's what you do with that feeling. You know, do you change? Mm-hmm. And I didn't. You know, I would always I always had an inch left. I always had some fucking wiggle room. Mm-hmm. Every time I would fuck up, there was always some wiggle. There was always a Brad Pitt on the phone. There was always some Sundance Award.
Some next project.
There was always Alma. There was always there was always wiggle room to get back into ego. Mm-hmm. And this time, there wasn't no wiggle room. That's why I attribute this woman with saving my life, because she destroyed any route towards that wiggle.
That's real.
It is real.
Rock fucking bottom.
Rock bottom. Bottom isn't when you experience the worst moment of your life.
Definitely.
Bottom is when you change.
That's right. It's when you actually, it's when you touch it, when you smell it, when it's right on your face.
Yeah,
and you feel it.
And
it's not about severity of what the thing is. It's about
what you do with it once it happens. So like, once it happened, I mean, when it landed, I forgot how to breathe. You know, because the subtext of the email was, your hustle's over, you know? And I forgot how to breathe. And the next thing I did after 2 minutes of sitting there, staring at a computer screen, was I went and loaded up a gun and sat at my table and was gonna kill myself. I was out of here. I didn't know what to do anymore. Like, all my ideas had failed. And I sat there for 2 minutes thinking, where's the wiggle room? I'd already used
What's my play?
Yeah, what's the play? And there were no options. It was like, there was nowhere to go. It's not like I could go outside and get a Choco Taco and chill on the, people were driving down the street, rolling down the window like, fuck off and die, you know? This is where I was in the early days of this shit. So I didn't even want to leave my house. And I had a woman living in my house who wasn't my wife. And I was on my way to go do some movie I didn't give a fuck about, just like momentum building kind of shit, movies, no intrinsic value, just like I need something on the cards, for this year. I need my 2 or 3 projects, one of these things. And I felt disconnected from all of it. And I wound up getting emails from certain dudes who, like you, were still involved in my life, even when it got ugly, when it got chunky. One of those dudes was Sean Penn. And Sean's like, you need to call Brolin. And I called Brolin, and he told me he was going to this meeting online. Now, the gun is loaded. Like, I haven't left my sitting position, And I wound up signing on to this meeting, and I heard one of the dudes who was speaking that night say, if you're new and you just entered, you don't have everything you want right now, but you got everything you need right now.
Wow.
Now. And he did that for like 2 minutes. And the first minute I'm thinking, you can't spend the whole rest of your share just snapping your fingers and saying now. Like, this shit is ludicrous. And I went into this judgment, which is what my alcoholism sounds like. It sounds like criticality. It sounds like judgment. And so I'm in my judgment, like, you better say, and a gun is right here. I'm like, you better say something that's really gonna get me the fuck out of where I'm at. And after 2 minutes, like, I felt like a giggle start to rise inside of me, and I felt something like presence. I stopped thinking about the email, stopped thinking about my hustle. The gun almost disappeared, and it was like I'm sitting here on this Skype call, and I'm present for the first time in my life. And I wound up writing the dude in the chat box like, hey, bro, I'm on the verge, I'm about to kill myself. He's like, oh, okay, cool, call me tomorrow. Just like throwaway. And I needed that. I had been enabled for so long in my life that if it was going to be me walking into this program and having a bunch of dudes pat me on the back like, hey, man, welcome home. Yeah. We're glad you're here. I'd have been out again, because then it would have been more wiggle room. Yeah. But the guy that I wound up running into was not having it. Yeah. And he said, hey, man.
So this just gives a bit more of the picture of what his life was like, what he was wrestling with. And you had a comment. I showed you this before, and you had a comment about that thing that guy did. Now. What is he doing there?
Well, it came up again. So one of the things that Willard's going to talk about, and we're going to get into this later in the chapter. And so when we get into this in a few episodes. Think back to this moment, like this now. It's meditation. And I don't mean some like Eastern mystical woo-woo. I mean like ancient Christian practice. Like Christians have meditated for a long time. Even the Bible says, meditate on my word day and night. Ancient Christian practice of the Jesus prayer. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And what Shia says here is, this just now. It was slow, it was methodical, and it made him, for the first time in his life, be present with himself. And a lot of the Christians that I know, they think that any kind of meditative, spiritual, repetitive, or rote and prescribed practice or prayer is something that is inauthentic and doesn't come from the heart. But one of the things that I really think Shia demonstrates here is spiritual practices, even ones like this that aren't necessarily aimed at in a spiritual direction. Like that moment saved his life, and ultimately through that brought him to Christ.
Right.
And it was because
go ahead.
It was because this guy used a practice, an embodied practice that got him out of his ego and finally present with himself in a way that he hadn't been before.
So this is something he says later in the interview. I'll just read the like 2 sentences. One of my other buddies watched this and he sent this to me as a quote. I thought it was so good because me and him had a conversation about silence and prayer. And Shia had this experience when he was living with these monks. Is he says I had never known how to pray because I had never cultivated silence. I had no absence in my life. We'll get back to that later in chapter 9. I had no absence in my life. Every unforgiving minute was full of some scroll or some more ego feed. And it's like, dude, I go to bed, like my phone lays next to my pillow when I'm in bed and I'm listening to some YouTube video. I get up, the first thing I look at is the screen. And it's like, of course, it's hard for me to pray because I hate silence, because I can't deal with not being entertained, with not having some kind of input. It's hard for me to sit, like lay in bed and read fiction, much less like go to my prayer corner and say my prayers. Like, I'm just saying this to say, like, this is, I think all of us in our modern age struggle with this a lot, but just this idea of like, you have no absence in your life. Every minute is just full of something. And it's, whether it's, Huberman has been on this kick about like, when you get up in the morning, like go look at the sun and walk outside. And it's like, yeah, create some silence, create some like embodied thing you do that doesn't look at your phone or turn on the TV.
When Elijah is being chased by the prophets to his death and he runs to the mountain of God, he doesn't hear the voice of God in the fire or the rain or the earthquake, but in a whisper. And very few of us create enough room in our lives to hear the whisper.
Yes. All right. This next bit is maybe one of my favorite bits in the whole interview. The whole thing's great. I'm going to link it below if you want to watch the whole interview. But in this bit, Shai is going to share a story that he heard that this guy who's leading this group he's becoming a part of gives him and tells him to listen to. And so I'll just let Shai tell us the story.
Or nothing. You go look for a dog, And so that made sense to me. He puts me in a car. He says, I need you to listen to this Sandy Beach tape. Now, at this point in my life, like I'm like barely hanging on. And I'm using this woman like drugs. You know, every time I need validation, I'm with this woman, and she becomes what the mask of success that the job created for me, which kept me from like really looking at myself. She became that for me in the interim. And he's like, you got to get rid of all of it. You know, there is no more work and no more romance for a year. You're going to have to give me a year. And I'm thinking like, I'm not going to be able to pull that off, you know? And right away I'm half measuring, and this is my wiggle room. I can't. And he says, I need you to download this tape, this Sandy Beach tape. Sandy Beach is a big speaker. And in this.
What was the speech?
Yeah, the speech was, he was talking about this Chinese farmer. And this Chinese farmer and his son, they're picking radishes about the ground, and they don't own the land that they're farming off of, and they're barely subsisting. They're giving 70% to the landowner. They're living off of 30% of these radishes. Their whole financial legacy is tied up into this workhorse. And one day, and the son is really working the land because the man is too old. And one day the workhorse runs up off the hill. He just fucks off. He's up the hill. And the son runs into the house and he shakes his dad up and he says, "Dad, you're not gonna believe this is a travesty. We're gonna die out here. I can't get these radishes to grow unless I turn this land over, and I can't move that hoe without the horse, and the horse is gone. This is a nightmare." And the old man, nonplussed, looks at his son. He goes, "I don't know what this is, son. I don't know if it is a nightmare. I can't call it." And the son thinks his dad's out to lunch, or like ambivalent, or something's wrong, or he's too old. And a couple days later, the kid is chilling on the porch, and he sees the horse running down the hill with 50 wild stallions behind it. And they run into the paddock, and he locks the paddock, and he runs inside, and he hits the dad. He's like, "Man, this is fuck radishes. Like, we're rich, you know. We're in the horse business. We're in the horse trading business now. This is a miracle, Dad. I'm gonna go tell everybody we're trading horses now." And the father looks at his son, nonplussed again, and says, "I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's a miracle. I can't call it." And a couple more days pass, and the son's trying to break these horses down, domesticate these horses. He doesn't know anything about horses. He's a radish farmer. So one of the horses ain't having it. And he rears up, kicks him in his leg. It's like 1400s China. There's no Kaiser Permanente. His shit is shattered. Yeah. They wrap him in some like tobacco leaves and sprinkle some mint on it, go sit in a chair for a while. And he's wailing, and the townspeople hear about it, and the townspeople run up on the little shack, and, "Oh man, what are you gonna do? You know, you can't domesticate these horses. You can't move this hoe. You guys are fully fucked. I don't know what you're gonna do, but this is pretty much the end, right? Like, this is a nightmare." And the old man says, "I don't know what this is." He looks at his son's leg. He goes, "I don't know what this is. I can't really call it." A couple more days pass. He's sitting with his son. He's trying to calm him down. He's in the middle of pain, and they hear this thunderous noise, and they look up on the ridge line, and they see 5,000 samurai on horseback running towards their little hut. And the commanding officer gets off his horse and says, "Give us your son. We're going to fight the Maoist army." And he looks at his son's leg, and he looks back at the samurai army, and he goes, "I would, but he can't get out the chair. You know, he can't get on his, he can't. No, I can't. I would, but I can't. He's crippled." And the man gets back on his horse, and 8,000 men ride off to their death. And I listen to this tape, and I'm driving back from the beach back to where I'm living, and I get out of my car, and her bags are packed.
Consider this your sign to stock up on signage. Because right now at Vistaprint, all signs are 20% off.
She's on her way out. And old me would have written a haiku poem in blood and ripped my shirt off Hulk Hogan style, ran down the street and jumped over the fence, and that guy, climbed the hair up the thing. Yeah, boombox in the air guy. That's what I came up on. And something in me, from having heard what I just heard, what feels like this is now I can't get no lower. I hear this like I can't call it. And it becomes like the most diplomatic breakup I ever had in my life. And I say, "What can I do?" And "Can I get you a car?" And she goes, "No, don't worry about it. Go get well." And I go walk into my house, and
I can't call it.
Yeah. I think this is so helpful for me at least, because again, like I said earlier, I think many of us, I do this where it's like, you know, oh, if I, you know, maybe if I had a better plan when I went to my master's program, maybe if I hadn't got my master's at all, you know, maybe I should have just done this or done that, or, you know, if I had only studied harder and done this, or figured out this skill and done that. And it's like, I think many times these things, these unfortunate like little miseries happen, and they compound in us, you know. Or if I hadn't broken up with them, or if I had broken up with them sooner, or whatever it is. And it's like many times we sit there and we're like, why did this happen? Why didn't this happen? And I think this this attitude, not apathy, but this attitude of like, look, man, I don't know exactly what's going on. Like, maybe this is a big moment, maybe this isn't a big moment. I guess we'll find out. Offers some level of peace of like, again, you got to deal with what's going on right now. You can't play this game of, living in the past, wishing you changed, or only focusing on the future, thinking about what's going to happen and never working on it now. And it's like, sometimes you got to just say, man, I can't call it. I don't know what this is. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I made these decisions. I don't know. The outcomes might not have been what I wanted, but I can't call it. I don't know. Doesn't mean you don't work on it. Doesn't mean you don't plan. Doesn't mean you don't have a idea for the future. Doesn't mean you don't sit down and do future authoring program. Doesn't mean you don't do any of that. But at some level, you got to have the grace of yourself and be like, look, man, I can't call it. I'm not the ultimate orchestrator here. I'm gonna do what I need to do. I gotta do some things. But at some level, you can't call it.
Well, and the wonderful thing about this story, I'm going to tell a quick story in a second, but first, just to connect this very tangibly with Willard. Willard is saying, okay, you've had some pain in your life, right? And you're trying to pursue God and the things God has for you. But you have to you have to come to terms with the pain and believe that God is good in your life despite those tragedies.
Right.
And so this I can't call it is not an excuse to not deal with the problems.
Right.
It
Which
is
is how some people will treat it.
Yes.
Which is the wrong attitude.
And it's not permission to get embittered either. Because I think a lot of the times what happens is something bad happens in our lives.
It's not an excuse to be nihilistic.
Yes. Something bad happens in our lives, and then we ask why God.
Mm-hmm.
We never feel God answer and give an explanation. And so root of bitterness takes hold and just keeps growing.
Right.
But this I can't call it mantra demonstrates to us our own ignorance.
Yes. Amen.
We can't call it because tomorrow 8,000 soldiers could come and request that you join the army by force. But if you got a broken leg, what yesterday looked like a tragedy could be today's salvation.
Yes.
And you just can't call it.
And you can't call it because you actually don't know tomorrow.
Yes. I met recently with a friend and mentor of mine. And this mentor and I were talking about our mutual educations. And he was saying how he thinks that despite the fact that he's a little bit older than me, that he regretted not getting the particular education that I got. He went in a slightly different direction. And so he was lamenting, talking about whether or not, Luke, you should have gotten a master's degree, that kind of conversation. And one of the things, my response to him was something that he told me when I was graduating high school and I was thinking about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Is he said, God's word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. And the interesting thing about a lamp is that it doesn't shine like a flashlight does down the road. It shines only as far ahead of you as you can hold it. And so, okay, you got to deal with everything that's in your past. You've got to take account of it and use it in some way to glorify God. But you don't know what's ahead on the path. And what you have to do is you have to take the next few steps to find out. And so I ended up giving him the same advice he gave me. And it really is this, I can't call it. It's like, yeah, you regret the fact that you got this degree and not that degree. Well, who's to say that God's not going to use you because of the things you learned, despite the fact that you don't think that they were good enough?
Right. All right, let's get to This is the last clip we're gonna play here. This interview. This is longer down the journey, and Shia has been living with these monks, studying for this film, and he's starting to see. It's not just he's starting to study. It's not just for the performance anymore. It's not just for the film. It's not just for his acting chops. It starts to become more than that for him. These practices, this meditation, these things that he's learning with these men about God, about theology, about the Bible. If you want another interesting interview, his interview with Bishop Barron, which Daniel and I are probably going to use at some point soon, I'll link that as well down below, and you can watch that. It's very interesting. But let's hear some more what Shia has to say about his experience with these monks.
Hustle, wiggle room. That's how it started for me. It's like, oh, you want me to do what? With who? Willem Dafoe. Oh, bro, forget all this sobriety talk. Forget all this cleaning. Yeah, I'm back. Ooh, here we go, bro. Back, right? It happened so fast. And now I'm in the mirror again. I'm doing my shit again. Just back to the old me, just getting to work, trying to find who this dude could be. And I'm back into like full blown.
Did it diminish the shame that was on your shoulder?
Yes.
Did that start to?
It went away. It went away immediately. This is what work used to do for me. It was like, okay, you talk shit all you want, agent man, but I'm like going to work. So like, I don't care, And even now, like, there's parts of me that are like, well, yeah, okay, you can hate on me all you want, but I'm still talking to this dude or doing that, and my head's still, I'm a human being,
of course.
And you got to navigate, you got to see when it happens, Right away when you said that, I'm in my head like, ooh, Coppola, like I want to like speak to like, who are you to this, and just constant. It happens. It's just a constant process you got to be aware of. So yeah, I remember driving behind them to go pick up this stuff. And this is early days, so I'm not even there for spirituality. I'm there for like, where do you put your hands? What's it look like when you do this? I'm just like building. Right. I'm just building, All right, what kind of, like the vapid shit. Yeah. What kind of shoes, thief, and just like, oh, prayer life? Yeah, okay, boom. Yeah, what does that look like? It just looks like a dude sitting in a room. Okay, cool. But I'm not going to actually get involved in that process, And so I'm driving behind them. They're going to pick up these groceries. And I see this dude on the left turn to the dude on the right. And he just starts laughing. Just ha, 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 ha. Like the kind of like, looks like a cartoon. Like a cartoon laugh. But it's kind of silhouetted because I'm in the back watching them drive. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I've experienced that a bit in my life. I remember being on Fury with you and laughing like that on the tank. And these are like the most incredible moments of my life looking back now. These moments where you're laughing like that. And they laughed all the way to go get the lima beans. And on the way back to the seminary, they laughed all the way back to the seminary. And I thought this was a one-off. And every time we would get in the car and these dudes would get in the car, it was this silhouette of just outrageous laughter. And, you ask him, like, what are you laughing about, man? Yeah. And the dude's like, don't know. Everything. Sometimes I just look at the dude and we'll just start laughing at each other. And it's joy was the first, like, laughter was the first miracle. It felt like, I don't know, that was the first attractive thing about faith for me, was the laughter. Wow. And the fact that these monks aren't like docile, solemn all the time. They cut each other's hair, they're in the gym, they're dudes, but they also have a principled life. And that became very attractive to me at a certain point. I've always been attracted to guys like Kevin Vance. I've always been attracted to a Marine, to a gangster, to an extremist who's cultivated this kind of tribe around him, who it resembles some kind of weird, jumbled up idea of masculinity to me, these go-getters in life. Because really what's sexy is the commitment. The commitment to a lifestyle. Direction. Is sexy. Whether it be Bo or Kevin or whatever, you're committed to it. It's a lifelong thing. It's not a tattoo. There's no removal. This is forever, right? That's right? And so you get around these monks and you feel something like what you feel when you're around Kevin. You feel something like what you feel when you're around Bo. It's sexy. It's super appealing. You're a part of a group and they're knee deep in it. They are in love with what they got going on. And the Hollywood shit is secondary. I remember telling them what was going on for me in my life when I was there, and they were the first guys to say things to me that sounded like there was a route towards something salvific for me. Like, It happened, like this stuff also happened to a man named St. Augustine. And they started breaking down Augustine to me and who he was, and started explaining to me who St. Francis was. And you come to find that most of these stories of saints in the faith were fuck-ups, full-blown fuck-ups. They weren't perfect people who did perfect shit their whole lives and then wound up, requirement.
Touched by God from the beginning, poop and gold, like, yeah.
It wasn't that way.
Yeah.
The requirement for their sainthood was the fuck-up.
That they've been there.
They had to have experienced real negative shit in their life to be able to have this other thing, this salvation, this hero's journey. They're explaining saints to me, it's like the hero's path, you know? And I'm a writer, I'm in my head, you know, what is my hero's journey? I'm always asking myself, well, what? And I always thought it was gonna be through the craft. That my hero's journey was kid from the bottom, came to Hollywood with no fucking training, and now I'm like, you know, working with these people and this, and I'm doing that. And that was my hero's journey, and it was so curt. It was so blunt and lazy. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like this other thing that's available. And so you get around these dudes and you hear about their path and how these guys got there. And you start meeting dudes who, like professional tennis players, you know, got lost on steroids, you know, drugged up, got completely wayward, and then decided to enter the order. Mm-hmm. And so these are dudes who know something about competitive sports. They know about like ego in the way that I do. The only people I've ever been able to feel like I'm close to in terms of the way that I deal with my craft is athletes.
All right. Quote from Willard real quick. We will never have the easy, unhesitating love of God that makes obedience to Jesus our natural response unless we are absolutely sure that it is good for us to be and to be who we are. This means we must have no doubt that the path appointed for us by when and where and to whom we were born is good, and that nothing irredeemable has happened to us that can happen to us on our way to our destiny in God's full world. Willard's point and Shia's story demonstrate that the redemption of God can move in your lowest point. And we have to be able to find the redemption of God in that lowest point. It's open to us in the still small voice that meets us when we slow down enough to be present. But the opiate of the masses is noise.
Yes.
And we live in a culture of noise. And so to deal with our lives, as Willard would have us do, and as Shia has done, means we have to slow down enough, be present enough with ourselves and with God in the particulars of our lives. And the way we do that is through the spiritual practices.
And to lead us to a point where we're not ashamed of our lives and wish we had a different one. That's the goal. Then you can find the goodness of God in your life as it is and as it will be. And if you can't get there, good luck doing the rest of it.
Yep.